Hey there, I'm Amy from thecrazycraftlady.com. Every summer, Dollar Tree sells these hula skirts, and I thought it would be a fun challenge to see if I could try to make a few crafts with them. Let's see what I can come up with. For this craft, I just upcycled a little glass jar. It was from like artichoke hearts at Aldi, probably. And I cut off a handful, like 4 or 5 sections of the hula skirt. I held the ends together and I just hot glued them right to my jar. Silicone fingertip protector is a must because the hot glue tends to kind of seep through the layers of the hula skirt material. I didn't want to braid on this because I feel like I braid the hula skirt so often in my crafts. I just very roughly wrapped it around very simply, super easy. This is like this 5-minute craft. This isn't even a 30-minute craft, so I shouldn't say 5-minute craft. I wonder if I'll get trademarked for that. Okay. And then I got to the end and held down the ends with hot glue, so you may have to hot glue a couple of those strands individually. And then Dollar Tree has these little cardboard die cuts. I've heard that if you like soak them in water, you can like turn them into like 6, but I wanted the thicker, chunkier flower die cut. So I just grabbed some home decor, folk art home decor chalk paint. I think this is blushed pink. And I just painted the flower. So what I do is I set it on parchment paper so that the flower doesn't stick to the surface you're painting on as it dries. And then once it dried, I just strung one single strand of hula skirt through each end of that flower and tied it around the vase, and then secured it with a simple knot in the back. And then I thought this looked a little sad, so I just this is the only pink ribbon I had in my stash. It's kind of thick, so I had to fold it into thirds and wrap it around the top of the vase. And instead of doing a big bow, because I thought it would be too top heavy looking, I just did a kite tail. So you fold it in half and trim at a 45-degree angle. Very simple. And then this was kind of a burlap ribbon. So very, 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 very carefully heat sealed with a lighter so the ends don't fray. And that's it. A cute little decorative vase made out of an upcycled jar. For this craft, I started with 5 bamboo skewers from Dollar Tree or anywhere. They're for grilling. They're just bamboo skewers, right? Cut the all down to the same size. You just cut the little pointy end off. You just want basically little mini dowels, but bamboo skewers are cheaper than dowels, so that's what we're using. I set it on a piece of parchment paper and I tried to form my star, and I was kind of struggling with how to keep the star points in position. So what I came up with was this foam crafting tape. It's like double-sided little pieces of foam, so it's a little thick. And I just set one piece under each point of the star between the bamboo skewers and the parchment paper. And that way I had a little bit of give as I was forming my star shape, but then also the points stayed together. I hope that makes sense. But then I was able to just add a dollop of hot glue right over the top of each of those points. So it had hot glue on the top and like the foam mounting tape on the bottom. And then I just set some books on it while the hot glue dried. And then you peel the foam mounting tape off because you don't want that on the project. But then I realized, oh, this star is a little not as sturdy as I would have liked. So I went back and I added just a dollop of hot glue on those 5 points of that pentagon in the center of the star. And then once that hot glue dried, put on a podcast, get wrapping. This ended up using almost a full skirt of hula, a full hula skirt. It took a lot more than I guess anticipated it would. I thought it would go faster. Maybe if I did this again, I would do like a chunky yarn. maybe that would go faster. I don't know. But I'm still like super happy with how the craft turned out. I was surprised by how much material I needed to use. So I just kind of got wrapping. At first I started wrapping at all angles. And then I got a little more strategic and did like one point of the star at a time. You'll have to add some hot glue at the point to make sure none of that wood is poking through. And then I also decided that there was going to be a front side and a back side. There was no way that both sides of this project were going to look good with me hot gluing all the starts and stops on both ends of my hula skirt piece. So I pretty quickly early on said, okay, here's the back, here's the front. And that kind of took some of the pressure off to when I was hot gluing. I was like, okay, the back can look a little funky. No big deal as long as the front looks even and well balanced and fully wrapped, I'm in shape. So, and then when you get towards the end, you want to be kind of conscious about how you're wrapping the front center of the star so nothing looks, one side looks heavier than the other, and you want to make it look more even and balanced. You got to kind of think about, which way do I want to go when I'm doing my final passes with the hula skirt there. But then I reached a point where I thought everything looked pretty good. And then I just took a little battery-operated fairy lights, and at first I just started wrapping the same way I did with the hula skirt, but then I realized, oh, half the lights will then be on the back of the star. So I wrapped around one point, and then I made like a little S shape, and I wove down each section of the star, and then went and wrapped again. And this way, it's a little wonky to explain, but that way you get more lights on the front of the star here. And then when you finish, you wrap it around the back and you hide that battery pack underneath the star. But I think this would be a great Christmas craft and like a super inexpensive way to make a tree topper for a Christmas tree, which is what I might try to do this year. Every fall, Dollar Tree has these iconic foam pumpkins, and I've crafted with them a million ways by now, but we're going to do one with a hula skirt. So I just popped off the stem, grabbed my scissors, and poked a little hole in the top and the bottom of the pumpkin, and then put on a podcast or a movie, because this is definitely a craft to make while watching Netflix for sure. So I just worked in sections. I pulled one section of the hula skirt at a time. I stuck it in the top hole of the pumpkin, twisted as I hot glued down the side of the pumpkin, and then poked the other end into the bottom of the pumpkin. I was able to do 2 little passes across the pumpkin with each section of hula skirt here. Now, full disclosure, this took me a lot longer because had I to do this over again, I would have painted the pumpkin cream or white beforehand, because then you wouldn't have to use as much material to cover all of that bright orange. But like I said, I watched a movie and I just kind of got to work, so there's no big deal. But just keep working in sections, push one end of the pumpkin, hot glue all the way down, poke the other tail end through the other hole in the bottom of the pumpkin, rinse and repeat. And then so I'm going to speed this up for you. As you can see, I'm just twisting as I go along. And then things started to get a little trickier to stick the tail ends into the hole in the pumpkin, so I found it easiest to use the end of a Sharpie marker. For whatever reason, it was just the right shape, just the right size, and I was able to just poke those tail ends with a Sharpie. And then I just went outside and grabbed a twig from my yard, popped that in the top of the pumpkin for a stem, and then I grabbed just a couple sprigs of faux greenery and I hot glued those right on top of the pumpkin. And here's my cute little fall pumpkin craft. I don't think anyone would be able to guess that this was made out of a dollar store Hula skirt, for sure. For this craft, I started with these little mini plastic party cups, if you know what I mean, and some spray paint. So I actually I ran out of white spray paint. How I do that as a crafter is beyond me, but you just want to spray paint them a neutral color because you're going to be covering them with the hula skirt pieces, and it's a whole lot harder, as I learned on my pumpkin craft, to cover a bright color. So you just want a neutral underneath, white, cream, gray, whatever. And then I started grabbing 3 sections of my hula skirt at a time. I just cut the end of that twine piece and pulled them off. And then you tape it to your work surface. So you have 3 sections of 4, so 12 strands, and then you braid it all the way down. When you're using an adult hula skirt and these particular red party mini cups, you will need 2 braids to cover 1 cup. So I actually used 10 cups on this, so I had to make 20 braids. And then you take your dried painted cups. I used a little pen blade, stick it in the top of the cup, give it a few twists, and then very gently kind of poke a few little score marks in the top, because I have these string lights, these little mini twinkle lights, and you want to be able to pop that light through the top of the plastic cup. So cut as big of an opening as you need to pop that light through. And then I cut the painter's tape off the end of my first braid, added a dollop of hot glue, and started twisting and gluing. So you're going to start at the top and work your way all the way to the bottom in a little coil method on the top of the plastic cup. And then once you get down to the side of the cup, it's just row after row after row. And then when you get to the end of that first braid, you're going to hot glue all the way to the tail end there, and then trim off that painter's tape, and then trim off the end of another little braid, and then glue that end down, marry up the 2 ends, and then keep hot gluing until the cup is completely covered. Now you'll see sometimes the braid doesn't fully cover the cup. So you can see here a little bit of that lip is showing. Instead of going back in with another full braid because I was tired of braiding, I just grabbed, 3 or 4 pieces of raffia, twist them around, and just hot glue it right over that bottom section. So maybe just like a 1-inch section. I had a couple of little lights that I had to do all the way around the bottom of the cup. No big deal, just little twisted raffia, easy peasy. And here are my little finished string lights, and each light has its own little mini lampshade that you can string up. For this craft, I busted out my watercolor paints and a blank card. Now, even if you are not artistic, stick with me because anyone can make this card. It's foolproof flowers. So you're just gonna do little dots of clean water on the paper and then fill in with whatever color watercolor you like. My palette is a disaster and needs to be cleaned, so no judgment, but that's okay. So you're just gonna paint little dots, and they don't even have to be perfect circles. In fact, the messier the better. It's really, really simple. So I started with an orange color, and then I filled in with a second color. So here I'm doing yellow, and you're just kind of spacing them however looks nice. You want them interspersed like you would with any bouquet of flowers. So if you can't tell, each dot is going to be a single flower in our flower bouquet. And then I finished off my final, so you can I think 3 colors for this bouquet is pretty reasonable. And then I finished off with this like reddish purple color. Then you set that all aside to dry, and it dries pretty quickly, and then come back with a black marker or like a fine point marker or pen. I just use a micron pen, and you're gonna draw really messy flowers. I swear anyone can do this. I tried to zoom in as best I could, but you're just, for the outline of the flower, it's just 3 little squiggly lines and then a couple of dots in the center. Do 3 dots in some, 4 dots in some, it doesn't matter. And the squiggly, it's like you're drawing a cloud, right? So do like 2 cloud squiggles and then lift up your pen and then move over the tiniest bit and then 2 more cloud squiggles and then pick up your pen and 2 more cloud squiggles. And that's how you make flowers. And then if you're wondering, Amy, how on earth are you going to use this hula skirt? They're going to be the stems of our flowers. So imagine like dried flowers that aren't as green, and that's why I picked kind of more muted colors. So I first started by making my little stem bunch and tying it with raffia. But I was like, what are you thinking, Amy? There's just no visual contrast. It just didn't look good. So I actually went back and I just grabbed some orange twine that I ripped off a spool of ribbon. So any thin twine, colored twine, baker's twine would work. And I wrapped it, and then I made a simple bow. And if you haven't seen my simple bows before, it's bunny ears. 1 ear, 1 loop, 2 loop, crisscross them and tie them in a knot in the center. And then as you're pulling the 2 ears tight, you flip the 2 tail ends down. And then from there you can finagle and pull the tail ends and make the bow loops or the bunny ears the size that you want them to be. And then I very simply hot glued that little bundle to my card. And then you can kind of trim down your little stem pieces so none of them are covering up any of your flowers. And you may have to very, very carefully with the tiniest dab of hot glue secure some of those hula skirt pieces in place so that they stay where you want them to. And then I very simply wrote thanks at the top of the card, so this can be a thank you card for any occasion. I think I might start getting more into card making, and I'm thinking about making some Christmas cards for Christmas in July. Let me know what you think about that, but here's my finished little card. Okay, so for this craft, we're gonna make flowers. So you're gonna start with your little hula skirt and you're gonna remove just a bunch of the sections. You just want the plain strands, and I worked in bunches, so I matched all the ends. You marry them up so that they're all the same, all the ends are together, because you want to cut these all to the same length. So for this, I cut all of mine down to 6 inches. Instead of using a ruler, I just laid it out on my cutting mat and then snipped with my craft scissors. So I just cut a bunch down to 6 inches. And then I grabbed a 2-inch wooden ring, just fold 2 pieces in half, and then fold it over the wooden ring and then tuck the tail ends through and pull tight. And that way the strands stay on the ring without having to use any sort of hot glue or adhesive or anything. So just fold it in half, fold it over the ring, pull the tail ends tight, and you're in business. You do have to pull the tail ends fairly tight because the hula skirt material is kind of slick. But once you have that, little knot created, these stay in place nicely. So I'm going to fast forward here. You're going to see I'm quite a ways in, and now I have to kind of press the sections together because they tend to spread out a bit. So you every once in a while have to kind of press all of your current hula skirt pieces together to create room to add more sections there. And then work until the whole wood ring is covered. Then you can kind of fan and fluff out all the strands of the hula skirt there. Trim any pieces that are sticking out as too long. And you have a little flower here. So you'll see the front and the back look very different. You can choose which side you want to display. I chose to fill my centers. I wanted these to be kind of like farmhouse style sunflower type things. So I just used some black and white check ribbon. If I had black and white check fabric, I would have used that, but I used what I had. Or even, now that I'm thinking about it, scrapbook paper. Any type of pattern scrapbook paper would be a great option. But I just cut a little circle to go right on my flower on that wood ring there. I just very simply hot glued around the edge, all the way around that circle, and then I smoothed my little cutout on top. You don't have to worry about it being a perfect circle or the edges being nice or even because you're going to cover it. So I just took 3 pieces of raffia, twisted it, hot glued it, and then twisted it some more and kept hot gluing all the way around the circle. And that way you cover the edges. And then when I got to the end of the circle, I just gave it another twist, hot glued down, used my silicone fingertip protector there, and then you're in business. And then to make a stem for my flower, I just used a bamboo skewer, like for grilling. These come at Dollar Tree, and I just hot glued that right at the base of the flower. And there's my little rustic little sunflower craft. And then I also didn't film this, but I made a second one using 8-inch cuts of raffia and a 3-inch wood ring. And then of course your flowers need a vase, so I grabbed this little salsa jar that had somehow gone through the dishwasher. And my sea glass spray paint, I just went outside, do a few coats. Especially with sea glass spray paint, I do recommend doing fewer, thinner coats because it can get kind of runny. But then I came inside and I grabbed my hula skirt and I grabbed 3 sections at a time. So you can see how it's folded over that twine. You just peel off 3 sections, tape it down to your work surface, and just braid them all the way down. It's very simple. So it'll be 3 sections of 4, so 12 pieces of that raffia at a time, and then just braid all the way down. And I made 2 of these, and we're gonna hot glue them right onto the jar because the jar seemed a little sad. So I just hot glued all the way around the base of the jar, and I did 2 rows all the way around. Super simple. And then I also added a row at the top just because it looked a little sad with only the braid at the bottom. And then I popped my flowers in. Like I said, the first flower was a 2-inch wood ring with 6-inch cuts of the hula skirt, and the second flower was a 3-inch wood ring with 8-inch cuts of the hula skirt. But here's my finished craft. This craft is probably my favorite pizza pan craft to date. So I just grabbed a dollar store pizza pan, thrift store, Walmart, whatever, just something cheap. And I just started by painting it. So I only did 1 coat. This is Waverly chalk paint in the color Celery. By just doing 1 coat and like not priming it, it's not going to stick the best, but it doesn't really need to have like perfect coverage because most of it's going to be covered up anyway. But I just painted like half of the front and all of the back, just so it looked a little bit more finished. And then once that paint had dried, I grabbed a piece of a manila folder or a piece of scrap cardboard or whatever, and I traced half of the pizza pan onto the manila folder just with a pen. This is going to create our little pocket pouch for our flower basket. So from there, I just cut that out with my craft scissors, and I was ready to make my basket. And so for my basket, I went to Dollar Tree and I grabbed some hula skirts. So if you can't find hula skirts at your Dollar Tree, raffia works just as well. So grab 6 sections of the hula skirt and make a braid. So 2 sections in each third of the braid, right? 6 sections total. And just braid all the way down. I added masking tape at the top to hold it together, and then masking tape at the bottom to hold it together. And then continue that process throughout, like, I don't know, how many did I do here? 7 pieces of hula skirt, or 7 more braids of the hula skirt. And then cut them off and then start hot gluing them in rows to your manila folder semicircle here. So just plenty of hot glue and just add it in rows. And then when I got to the end of the row, trimmed it off with scissors and repeated the process again. As I got closer to the bottom of my little basket, I was able to kind of double up my braid and use it twice. And I ended up using one full hula skirt for this project, plus a little bit of a second one. So you will need to buy 2 hula skirts if that's what you're able to find at Dollar Tree for this. Otherwise, like I said, raffia works just fine. Another helpful tip is when you're trimming the braid ends is to cut at an angle and try to match the curvature of the pizza pan. But here's my finished little basket base, and then it's time to make the handle. And so once again, we're gonna braid here, but you need 3 lengths of braid to make an appropriate handle to match a dollar store pizza pan. So what I did is when I got kind of towards the end of my braid, I grabbed 2 more pieces of hula skirt raffia, and I hot glued it right into the braid there. Just a little dab of hot glue, and then add the 2 top sections of that hula skirt piece, and then keep braiding. And so just do it one at a time. So add 1 section, do a couple more crosses of the braid, add another section with hot glue, a couple more crosses of the braid, and add another section. So you're staggering where you're sneaking in and adding length to your hula skirt raffia pieces. But I did this 2 times, so 3 braid lengths. And then from there, it's time to add flowers. So I got these little tulips at Michael's on clearance at the end of spring, but really any flower that you like would be a great option. I just kind of cut all the stems off with my heavy-duty craft scissors. And then I kind of visualized how I wanted everything to go. I decided I wanted the darker flowers in the front and the darker flowers in the back and the lighter flowers in the front. So I just grabbed some white duct tape and duct taped my flowers in place 1 row at a time. Keeping in mind you want to try to keep all that duct tape below where that basket base is going to cover. And this is why I only painted the top half of the pizza pan, because I wanted my duct tape to be sticking to just plain metal, not painted metal. So then from there, it's time to attach your basket base, and I wanted the best hold here just because there was a lot going on. So I used a combination of dabs of E6000 glue and hot glue. Hot glue gives you the immediate hold. E6000 glue makes sure this sucker is not falling apart anytime soon. And then I just used my long length of braided hula skirt and I hot glued it across the left and the right side of my pizza pan, but then it left a little gap in the top. And so I just made another regular braid of hula skirt and hot glued that right over the top of the pizza pan. And then that was it. I was able to hang this hanger on just a regular hook on my wall, and it seems to be holding up well. But if you're concerned about the strength of that braided hanger, you could easily use a 3M command strip, like a Velcro command strip, on the back of the pizza pan and stick it against your door or your wall. And that makes the braided hanger a little less functional and more decorative. And here are all of my finished hula skirt crafts. I think the twinkle lights are my favorite. If I'm being honest, I'd love to hear your opinion down in the comments section. But I do hope you enjoyed watching these projects come together. Until next time, happy making. Hey, if you enjoyed watching these crafts, give one of these videos a watch. Thanks so much.